All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. This is normally a great way to start the week, but hey, what a great way to go into the weekend with another great podcast today. And I'd like to introduce you to our guest. Our guest today is Mr. Joe Galli. He is the COO and lead commentator for the National Wrestling Alliance. He's a podcast host and an Emmy Award winning broadcast journalist. Joe grew up in Los Angeles, California, graduated from Cal State University Northridge while beginning his career in professional wrestling, first as an in ring competitor and later as a broadcaster, ring announcer, and interviewer. During his decade long career in journalism, Joe has covered some of the biggest stories in the country, including the Las Vegas mass shooting, wildfires, hurricanes, political corruption, COVID 19, and much more. Joe is now also the co host of 33 with William Patrick Corgan, where, along with Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan and co host Kyle Davis, the trio does deep dives into the latest Smashing Pumpkin album, Atum. The podcast also features celebrity guests, including recently YungBlud and Willow Smith. Welcome to the show, Joe. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here. Look, I used to live right around the corner from you, apparently. Come on now.
Yeah,
What's our
absolutely.
818? Come on now.
Well, I'm 805. We're in the
Oh, okay.
805, but
Oh, that's right.
close
That's right.
enough, close enough.
We're
Hey,
right there.
before we get things started, I just want to give a huge shout out to Ryan Katz who introduced us and gave us this opportunity to connect today and make this interview possible. Unfortunately, Ryan was unable to participate, but what a pro. He refers a great guest, and I've read your bio. We've chatted a little bit online, and looking forward to just telling your story, all about the pro wrestling industry, and so much more. So let's start with that. How did you get into the pro wrestling industry?
Well, like so many other people in the sport of professional wrestling, it usually starts as being a fan. And, I remember having those, fond memories being a child, living in my dad's, smallish house on Woodman Avenue in Arleta. And this is right when SmackDown was first, debuting on it. And, as a kid, I was growing up and, I wasn't the most affluent kid, but I was around a lot of kids who were, and they all had like cable TV and stuff. And so they're watching Raw and all sorts of stuff that I just couldn't get because we were still working off of rabbit ears to give you folks at home understanding of where we are in the world at this point, uh, at least time wise. And then, so yeah, SmackDown it's there, and I remember watching it while my dad fell asleep on the couch, and so I was a fan for a long time, and I was a fan throughout high school. I had my little clique of like sort of theater group friends that were also wrestling fans, and we were getting buying the pay-per-views back when they still were pay-per-views, and doing backyard stuff that you're not supposed to do and you should never do. But I did it and became successful, so I don't know what to tell you. So it's one of those things where you just kind of get into it, and then while I was in college, and I was never an athletic person. I never did football or amateur style wrestling at school or anything like that. Um, but I had a friend, or I have a friend, Brandon Taylor, who now wrestles under the name Robert Baines and currently works for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He was like, "Hey, I found this ad in the paper, like a physical paper with a physical ad in it." Like, I continue to date myself with this. And then it was a 2-for-1 coupon for this wrestling school where Ryan Katz was running that wrestling school along with Dan Magnus and a few other folks, Brawlin' Bo Cooper and some other guys. That speaking of Moore Park, I mean, that guy's like the king of Moore Park. But so yeah, I just got there and I kind of just got hooked on it, after that first introduction into it. And it's one of those things where it just like, I just got addicted to pro wrestling after you start taking bumps and learning
Yep.
about it, learning how to do it. And you just kind of get hooked on it. So then it just kind of became part of my life. Then on out, you start working small independent shows and doing things like that. And, I was doing that for a long time, even while I was starting my career as a broadcast journalist. I got my first gig in Toledo, Ohio, and I worked a couple of small shows, very few and very small, but like, in Monroe, Michigan, and, some places down Sandusky, Ohio, and these little tiny, towns and
Hmm.
whatnot and stuff like that. So, it's and then eventually I moved into the broadcast side of it, which is where I am now, and I love being there. I get to work the whole show and kind of guide the broadcast as it were, and I don't have to take a bump. I don't have to fall on my neck, which is nice. Let
Right.
all everybody
Well,
else do that.
It's great. You brought up so many names. It's amazing that we have not met prior to this because the pro wrestling world is somewhat, especially in the SoCal scene,
Oh
pretty
yeah.
tight knit community. I do want to make one correction. If you're going to name a king of Moorpark when it comes to professional wrestling, there's only one king of Moorpark, and I think that's Danny Devine.
Okay, well that's a good point. But I was thinking more of the time when I was
Yeah,
there.
I
Right,
gotcha.
right now it was a different story, but at the time, I mean, Brawl Bo was. I mean, he was all over the place. I think he's
Yeah,
still working too. God bless him.
yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I just got to give a shout out to my boys because Danny and Brendan are two of my really good friends, some of the best friends that I made through the pro wrestling industry, and so yeah, really good guys. Still wrestling out of Chatsworth at MPW. So
Yeah.
listen, let's back up a little bit. Growing up in the 818, growing up out there near the San Fernando Valley, you talked about watching SmackDown and being a fan of pro wrestling. What were some other hobbies, or what were some other things that you did that ended up leading you to go to Cal State University Northridge?
We- Boy, it's one of those things where I come from a very working class family, you know, and so like I have an older brother. He didn't go to college, so there was like a lot of pressure on me to just go to college. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the best scholastically. But growing up in Los Angeles, I feel like you're so exposed to the television industry and movies and things like that. So that was sort of the idea when I was going through high school, is I wanted to work in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I didn't have the grades or the money to get into USC or UCLA or any of those other places. As much as I applied, and they told me no, anyways. But anybody can, if you've got a pulse, you can get into Cal State Northridge, or at least you could at the time. You didn't have to be too smart and all that other stuff. And they made a lot of exceptions for people. Like I had to go to like summer school before and stuff like that. So it was kind of more, going to Cal State Northridge was more just a lot of pressure from, the exterior things that you see in life all the time, where there's an expectation set for me to go to this, and that's affordable enough. At least it was at the time. I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
even is now. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
I were 18 years old right now and looking at a tuition bill from any state college, I don't know how anybody's able to do it without just getting into mountains and mountains of debt. Which I didn't get into mountains of it, but I got into like what I would consider a reasonable amount of debt at the time to go to school there. So like that was sort of the thing. And then I was going there and I was like, maybe I wanted to do the film program at Cal State Northridge, which is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't have the ability to do that and work full time because I was catching shoplifters at Rite Aid and Sears at the time. I was working in loss prevention back when that was actually a job. Now it's like, you look at a lot of these stores and you see all these videos, especially coming out of places like LA, and they're just ransacking the place. And you see those people with the loss prevention jackets or something, and they're like, could you please stop doing that? And I feel so bad for those people because, like, back in my day, when we had those types of jobs, it was a little bit more Wild West in the fact that, like, you were waiting for people to step one foot out the door, and then boom, you're fucking going after them, and you're putting cuffs on them, and you're pepper spraying people, and getting into fights over bottles of alcohol and stuff like that. Um, which is all great when you're 20 years old and you're, making money to go to college and you do your classes in the morning and then you try to wrestle on the weekend. So it was way different than what it is then. But like, so going there, and then I was trying to do it in the film program, but I couldn't work full time, which I had to do, and go and do the film program. So I was like, well, what can I do? And then I looked at the schedule for broadcast journalism, which was in the same building, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, I'll just do that. And like I had no ideas or thoughts when I changed my degree to actually have a career in news. It
Hmm.
was, what's the most efficient way I can get a degree and get out of here and not have to continue to pay tuition. So that's what got me in. And then it was one of those things where you just, I had obviously a natural sort of talent to talk and perform, which I think professional wrestling gave me a lot of that.
Sure.
And so I was able to use that and kind of just, it's one of those things where some people, when in a derogatory sense, say fail upward, but I was taking things so casually that I think it came off as a sort of confidence in myself. And I would go to these things, and I was never going to be the good kid that like wrote a good 10-page essay or did well on the Scantron test. but I could cut together a demo reel and do something that's fun and goofy. And honestly, that's what I needed to do in order to be successful in broadcast journalism. Because at the end of the day, when you leave college with a degree, especially for TV news, if you want to be on air talent, your grades, your whatever, all that, it's meaningless. What you need is the good demo reel to get your foot in the door. And then
Right.
once you've broke that glass ceiling, then you can continue on. It's just, you just have to get that one step in. So I made this ridiculous damn demo reel that was just the first spot. Speaking of Brawlin' Bo Cooper, we'll go back to him. My first thing was I was doing a fake news report from inside the wrestling ring, Make Me a Pro Wrestler, or we called it the Fit Pit eventually, which is a now
Mm-hmm.
defunct school. And Brawlin' Bo picks me up and gives me a Death Valley driver in the center of the ring. And it was just from that. And then I just did a bunch of wacky stuff in it. And it's like, it was counterintuitive to what everybody else was doing, because everyone else was trying to get like a serious news job,
Mm-hmm.
because they took it seriously. And I think with me doing it the way I did it and being so different, is it really put me in the forefront for people that were looking for something that was different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look at, like, if you're a news director and you're looking at, oh, my cat's come to join us, everybody. I don't know if you can see, hi, say hi, Megatron. There's Megatron.
What's up, Megatron?
She lives up to that name. We call her Ron for short. But you especially in those small markets, you're getting 10 demo reels a week from college students trying to get their foot in the door, and they're all the same. Like, I'm here outside the crime scene, da da da.
Mm-hmm.
Here this function here at Cal State Northridge, we're learning about autism awareness or whatever it is, all these serious things, whereas I'm doing all this goofy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there just happened to be a television station in Toledo, Ohio, which is the NBC affiliate there. WNWO, which was a good sign, says, "Hey, NWO, all right, let's do it." But they were looking for a fun morning reporter, and I was like, okay. And then so they were working with a consultant who knew one of the college professors, and I just kind of got my foot in the door, and I mailed a DVD. Like, this is before I could have sent a link on YouTube, folks.
Right.
Like, this is where we are in the world. I mailed a DVD that had a picture of me on it. And they got back to me, and sight unseen, I said, sure. And I just took this job, and I had just graduated, moments before.
Interesting.
So like, that was the thing. I really got hired before I was even done. And honestly, that should have been a red flag. It's one of those things you learn with the time, because it's like, Toledo, Ohio's market 74, at least it was at the time. I don't know where it is now. That's a relatively high market. You shouldn't be starting there. You should be starting in your market 100s or something, places like Bakersfield or Palm Springs, or really smaller town, Eureka, the places like that.
Mm-hmm.
Portland, Maine, if I want to go and use an East Coast example, or Abilene, Texas, if you want to use a Texas example. So I went there, and it was just a terrible station that had bad leadership and no money, and I was making $24,000 a year, which was a fraction of what I was making catching people at Rite Aid, So it was like, I was clearing 60K, tackling people at a drugstore, and I'm making less than that in the middle of nowhere. But I made the most of it. I did a lot of fun stuff, and it just kind of snowballed into this career that I have today. And it's one of those things of, they hired me on as the fun, goofy morning reporter, and that person, in the 2 years that I worked there, I went through 4 news directors, and that's insane. That is an insane turnover for somebody who's supposed to be the captain of the ship guiding a station. So as soon as we got the new news director, like, we're not doing this goofy stuff. You are going to go and do news now. And it's like, oh, great. Now I have to pretend I know what I'm doing, which I really didn't at the time. I feel like,
Well,
you just learn on the job.
what I think is interesting, and I think that viewers that are watching, by the way, if you guys are watching, thanks for being here live. If you're watching the replay, drop us some comments, and if you have any questions during this interview, please drop those as well, and I'll be happy to throw them up on the screen for Joe to answer. But one of the things that you said was, or that you explained, was that you found a way to kind of set yourself apart, make yourself different. And, in the pro wrestling world, that is huge, right? I mean, you got to have a good gimmick. You got to have something that really stands out and really grabs the audience. In the business world, when you go into an interview, you're going to get 50 of the same people saying the same things with the same canned answers, but you come in and do something a little bit unique and a little something outside the box, and you get noticed. And when you get noticed, opportunity presents itself. And when opportunity presents itself, now we can make a decision. Do we jump on it, or do we learn from it and move on to the next opportunity, right? So I think that that's just kind of a unique thing that we just, really talked about casually. But those of you that are listening, since the topic is motivation, and ultimately motivation leads us to have better discipline, which helps us to reach our goals and be successful. So, I also want to say too, by the way, you were talking about Cal State University Northridge. Don't sell yourself short. I mean, it's a great school. I know because my wife went there and graduated. So go Matadors, right?
Go
She was
Mavericks.
a
Yeah.
psychology major. Great school. As a matter of fact, I attended for about 6 weeks. And decided that school was not for me, and ended up pursuing my career in the martial arts, which absolutely worked out for me and opened up a lot of doors. As a matter of fact, getting involved in martial arts and having a martial arts school is what introduced me ultimately to become part of the pro wrestling world, because I was a fan like you growing up, loved watching. I grew up in the 80s, so all the, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Randy Savage, those years were amazing. And I always wanted to be a pro wrestler, but I just, I got so involved in other things. But martial arts actually brought me in. I've told this story many times on the show that I ended up meeting someone that asked me to come to the Boys and Girls Club in Simi Valley to promote the martial arts school. And I was like, cool, this is awesome. What's the event? Oh, it's a pro wrestling event. Amazing. Great. Get introduced to the promoter, to the owner, Logan X, who was just on the show just about a week ago. And Logan says to me, hey, why don't you come check out our school? We got a school in Chatsworth, bump you, boom, and right in the door. So it's just crazy how all these, like we said, doing things unique, getting outside the box, finding opportunities, seizing the opportunities, and you know, in some ways, we get to live out a dream of being a part of the pro wrestling world. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, what were some of the things that maybe you struggled with as a child that may have carried into your adult life?
My sexuality. I'm kidding. That's a joke. Anyways,
Everybody
I
just leaned in
was
a little
careful.
bit more.
What? Um, no, fortunately, I didn't have that burden. I know a lot of people who did, and that no joking matter. I mean, that could be a real struggle for people. But legitimately, my problem is like, I think and I really see it now is much worse. Is I feel like I was not motivated to better myself in a lot of ways. Like from a very early age, I struggled to read and I struggled to spell, and like I was kind of like, I think I was one of those early people who was kind of, you know, addicted to the digital side of things, playing a lot of, original version Game Boy, that gray brick that, had the
Hmm.
green screen on it. And so I would do anything I could to spend more time doing that instead of like learning and things that like, would have paid off eventually in your life. And it's all stuff that like, I didn't see a value in it, and so I was actually a pretty bad student overall, whether it came to math or reading or science, especially throughout my elementary school years. And so that took a lot for me to be able to kind of get past that and to continue on and to get just good enough to kind of get to that next level, whether that was to get into, my parents, or particularly my father, did not want me to go to LAUSD schools. He thought I'd have a much better shot, going through a Catholic school system, which at the time was still mildly affordable for a middle class family. It would not be now, which is a shame. But so I was just good enough to kind of continue on. And every year I went to summer school and I struggled and and I never really got there. And I'd much rather do those things. And I think I kind of see that now. I look at
Hmm.
a lot of the young kids, whether it's in my family or in other families, you go out to dinner and they're all kind of just, there's no interaction anymore. Everybody's just kind of on their phone doing it. Yeah, there's that. They're playing games on it. And I don't blame them because I was doing the same thing at a younger age, but I just feel like maybe it's ratcheted up so much more now.
Hmm.
And so I think that I kind of struggled with that, but I always had an enthusiasm to kind of, please people and to kind of make jokes and have a good time. And I think that really kind of saved me because there's so much to the world and there's so much to being successful that you could come down to just being personable and just being the person that like people want to hang out with. and be a part of whatever that society is. And I think that that's how you can land a job somewhere where you don't have a lot of experience, is you can make your elevator pitch. I think you see it, you brought it up earlier, when it comes to business and stuff. If you watch a show like Shark Tank, even if someone's product isn't, the best thing there, you'll see a lot of these sharks, a lot of these billionaires and millionaires who are looking to invest in stuff. They're like, I don't see anything in this, but I see a lot in you. And I
Hmm.
think that there's so much value to that as well, as to what you could be as far as your personality is and how people can perceive that as well.
Hmm.
So I struggled a lot, like academically, and I was never really challenged physically either, because I think I didn't show a lot of initial interest in it. You get a lot of kids out there, you throw them a basketball and all of a sudden that's all they want to do is dribble the ball. And I didn't
Hmm.
have really that. And then also I didn't have parents that were particularly motivated, to push me into little league or something like that. One, because it's a financial burden for what we were doing at the time, and a time burden for, they're working all the time to try to make ends meet and stuff. And so it just never kind of paid out that way until, so I'm really very much a late bloomer when it comes to a lot of stuff, whether it was writing or any type of scholastic stuff. And so something kind of triggered in me later in life, but I feel like, finding something that I was passionate about really helped
Hmm.
me guide a lot of that better. And so I became, later in my high school career, I became like the entertainment editor of the newspaper, which, like, just a few years before that, before I got into high school, like there's no way that my parents or anybody would have thought that, because I was failing English all the time. It's like, so how does one change that? So something is, a level of interest changed, and then I was able to take that interest and then focus it more into something that I was enjoying. And it's something that I always try to make something fun, and I think that
Hmm.
that's really the thing, is like, if you could take anything in life and try to find some fun in it, and that's going to level your interest up, and that's going to make it to where you can make it more successful, and you can make
Right.
a life with something that you really enjoy.
Well, I think that's an amazing statement, and as more and more people are starting to tune in and you guys are watching and you're enjoying the conversation, please throw any questions, any comments, any thoughts in the comments below, please. But what you talked about was passion. When you're passionate
Mhm.
about something, it drives you, right? I mean, I love doing this podcast, and quite honestly, this is the one thing I don't get paid for. It has nothing to do with my job, but I get a lot of joy out of bringing stories like yours to an audience of people that might just take, man, if they just take one little nugget away from this conversation today, that's a great feeling, and that brings a lot of passion to this project for me. Martial arts has been my life. It's been my career, but I've always loved it. And the old saying that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And for
Mhm.
me, that could not be more true. I mean, I get so many opportunities based on doing what I love to do. And so for those of you that are watching, if there's something that you love to do, there's a way to turn that not only into opportunity, but potentially a career, potentially, a second job, a second stream of income, lots of different opportunities. You're doing quite a few things, right? You're doing the
Mhm.
podcast, you're the COO of NWA. Um, how did you start to, I guess the word would be diversify. How did you get involved in so many of these different things? How do they all tie together?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up, and I'll back it. I'll get to that and go back to what you were also saying before. Is you talked about, things that you're passionate about that can become cornerstones of your life. A lot of times people don't even realize what those passions could be,
Hmm.
because of fear and trepidation, especially fear of failure. I think a lot of people, and or a reluctance because something scares you. But if
Hmm.
you could take a moment and embrace that fear and find something and recognize, oh, I don't know if I could be able to do that. But
Hmm.
if you take a second, you realize, well, why can't I? And why shouldn't I be able to do that? And I'll give a great example, and it has a lot to do with what you're doing with your life in martial arts. Like I said, I did professional wrestling, which is, very different than most martial arts out there. It's just completely, there are similarities, but there's a lot more that I feel is different for it. And I was never into it. I was never like, a big UFC fan or anything like that. But I did tell you that when I initially moved to Texas, I was in a toxic relationship. I needed to find an outlet. I basically wanted to find an excuse to not really be home at the time. And I was trying to find something I could do when I wasn't doing news that I could channel all this negativity that was in my life at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
there just so happened to be a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu slash Muay Thai gym that was around the corner from the apartment where I was living. And initially, as I'm looking for things, looking for this outlet that I could take and, honestly just not be around what I was around at the time. And I thought, man, I don't think I could do that. That was my initial thought. And then I said, I'm gonna say yes to this. I'm gonna dive into the fear and know that there's so many people out there that get frustrated when they can't get something right the first time. They want to be able to kind of just immediately but when you look at something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're going to get tapped out 15,000 times before you ever, can get on someone's back, And so I think embracing that. So it was one of those things where it's like, I'm just going to say yes to this. And I feel like that's been the thing that's kind of guided me throughout my life and allowed me to be successful is saying yes to a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of leaving yourself open to doing new things and different things. So I kind of said yes to the martial arts. And then I went to this place. It's a great school. It's still there. I just live too far from it now. It's one of those things of like, you move to another part of town. And it's like, well, I could go and continue working out at this gym, but I want to pass 16 other jiu-jitsu places along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll
Mm-hmm.
give them a plug. They're called Pinnacle, or it's on the northwest side of San Antonio. And so it was great. And I was there and I was literally going like 4 or 5 times a week. And I was doing, they had the morning jiu-jitsu class, and then I'd go to work, and then I get off work, and then I go to the evening Muay Thai class. And I kind of destroyed my body doing it. Because like it was one of those things. I have a bit of an addictive personality where I kind of dove in too hard and I completely destroyed my sciatica and all this other sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But saying yes, and that gave me so much more, and actually kind of I think really helped me get through that time in my life that was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And so it kind of really helped me with that. And the same thing happens with professional wrestling, especially the broadcast side is I to go back even further, I moved from Toledo back to Southern California. I was living in Palm Springs. I got a job at KESQ, the Desert's News Leader. And my friend, Brandon Taylor, who I went to that first school with, that first time with, and who you probably know as the hobo, better
That's
known,
right. That's
of
right.
course. He was Dave Marquez's champion at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. He was the Heritage Champion. He was like, hey, Dave needs a new guy to come in and do commentary because Todd Kenley was moving to TNA Impact at the time, or TNA at the time, Impact now. And so I said, okay, sure. And so I made, it's a 3.5, 4 hour drive to go from Palm Springs to Port Hueneme where they were filming this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's without traffic.
You drive right past me.
I drove right past you and all the way there. And then I went there and I did a couple backstage interviews, which I was great at because, I'd just been spending the last, 5 years at that point. I was already doing interviews just for news. And Dave, who I owe a lot of credit to, giving me my real first start in broadcast in the professional wrestling world, he asked me to come back. And I came back the next taping and I sat next to Johnny LaQuasto and I called Championship Wrestling for Hollywood for a number of years. And that's how I got my foot in the door. And so just saying yes to that. And then they're like, hey, we're doing this other show. It's Championship Wrestling from Arizona. So we want someone to do commentary there. Great. Say yes to that. So then I go and now I'm one weekend's Hollywood, next weekend's Arizona, then one weekend off, Hollywood, Arizona. And it just kind of keeps staggering. It kind of becomes your life at that point. But I love professional wrestling, so it was great. And then here comes Billy Corgan, and he's trying to revitalize the NWA. He had just bought the brand. He had the strap was still on Tim Storm, and he wanted to get it on television somewhere. And so he came to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and that's where they started to do the 10 Pounds of Gold series. And those matches there were, Tim Storm versus Zicky Dice, and then Nick Aldis having his first matches before he, beat Tim Storm for the strap. Those right there, Billy pulls me to the side with his business partner at the time after the first taping that they came by. And, here's this guy, Billy Corgan. I mean, he's kind of an imposing figure because he's not just this, enormous rock and roll star. He's legitimately like a large person, like 6'3", 6'4". He's a big guy. And he pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. I'm really serious about the NWA. This is not just some weird pet project that I have. I want
Mm-hmm.
to make it a big thing." And he said, "I want you to call it." And I was like, "Great." I just said yes on the spot. And I was like, I had no idea it'd be getting to the
Hmm.
point to where we are today, where we're having, if you're watching this live, we're going to have a big show in New Orleans, Hard Times, on November 12th, and Revolution Rumble November 13th. And then we're going to have more big shows, and we're going to be expanding even more when it comes into 2023. And it's to the point to where my sole income is from professional wrestling at this point. And, if I would have told 13-year-old Joe Galli, who's watching, SmackDown on a 17-inch screen that's, the TV's deeper than it is wide,
Right.
it's like I wouldn't believe me at that
Yep.
time. So I've been very fortunate, but a lot of that fortune, and you could call it luck, you can call it everything, but when you take a step back, a lot of it was just my willingness to try stuff and
Mm-hmm.
just to say yes and to do things. So if you're
Right.
presented opportunities in the world, you have to kind of grab the bull by the horns and trust your gut. I think that that's like the number one thing. Not to say that I never said no to certain things. Of course, you
Right.
say no to certain things, but it's the trust in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to know when to walk away from stuff too. And I think that
Sure.
that's a big portion too. But I've been so fortunate that I've continued on and stuff, and I've been doing this, and now I'm here, and it's I think I'm a testament to sort of that American dream. High times, Daddy. It's one of those things where you could kind of keep persistence. I think is the key thing. There is the persistence, and if you keep doing things, eventually you get better at them, and then that translates into people seeing you as talented. Whereas
Right.
I feel like a lot of talent out there is just the results of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. It's coming down and having that stuff. And, very few people are touched by God when it comes to things. It really comes down to the amount of work that you put in and your willingness to sacrifice things. If you, if I went back and I decided, when I moved to Palm Springs, because it's such a party town, I could have said, "Hey, Brandon's like, hey, they need a new broadcaster." It'd be like, "Nah, man, f that. I've got a Monday through Friday job. My weekends are open. This is the bridesmaid, wedding party capital of California. I'm just gonna go and get drunk and get laid every weekend and have a great time, and I don't want to mess that up." But no, instead, I decided, on several weekends to drive 4 hours, sometimes more, 6 hours when we were doing shows in Tucson. And I
Mm-hmm.
sacrificed all that time and that
Right.
energy. But it got me to where I am today. And what would happen if I didn't do that? If I didn't
Right.
make those sacrifices and be out on the road and all that sort of stuff. And it's one of those things, even though I was working in television, and to be honest, I think at the time I was probably one of the more well paid people that Dave paid. But even with that, driving from Palm Springs to Port Hueneme and back on the same day, just the gas alone, that was most of the check there.
Right.
But in all honesty, if you really look at it and you look back at it, the opportunity that I had there, it's almost, I should have been doing it for free. It's one of those things where I should have been paying to do it because of the exposure that you get and the opportunities that it gets there. And so there's a lot of people that get upset. It's particularly, in the world of professional wrestling when they first get started, everyone gets mad at the $20 in the handshake that you get paid, but it's kind of what you make of it and the
That's right.
sacrifices that you're willing to take. It's not about the paycheck. I understand that everyone's got bills to pay, and not everyone was in the position like I was, where I had a pretty good full time job that didn't interfere with me doing my wrestling at that time, and not everybody has that. So when they're going
Right.
and they're thinking about, I didn't have kids to feed, I wasn't married, I didn't have all these other things that would have made people make a second chance, a second thought at that, or ask for
Mm-hmm.
more money, or ask for more of that. So
Right.
I was kind of just put in the perfect storm for that to be successful and to get where I am.
And it's funny. I see this in the martial arts industry as well, and we see this probably in any other industry, any other business. It's a matter of how you look at it, right? You're talking about the investment of time, right? The $20 for a match or whatever it is, or the drive it takes to get there. But what about that experience that you take away
Yeah.
from that match and from being in that locker room with some of the guys that are going to help elevate you and teach you on the
Hmm.
martial arts floor? We have a lot of students that we talk about how important it is to teach so that they can better themselves as a student, and ultimately maybe it does give them an opportunity. I can remember doing a lot of things for my instructor early on where I was teaching for free, but it opened up an opportunity for me to start teaching private lessons. And
Yeah.
then people started following me doing private lessons. So now the instructor wants me to teach classes. And now I've got a job teaching class 5 days a week. And then I invest all this time. I'm not making a ton of money, but the experience that I gained from it was what allowed me to start my own business and start my own martial arts school. So I think
Right.
that, it is a matter of how you look at that time and that investment. I'm going to throw this up real quick because the comment's been there for a bit, but really good friend of mine, Daniel Groff, says, hello, Jason and Joe. It's Daniel Groff. I enjoy these podcasts, as you stated. If you get one little thing that can help you, it was definitely worth it. So I appreciate you, Daniel. He's always tuning in and leaving comments and just watching. Please share this video. If you guys are watching here live, share this video. Let more people join in on the conversation. And let's get back to talking about, fear of failure and
Hmm.
fear of what others think. I mean,
Yeah.
how many opportunities have been lost because we feared what other people would think? I mean, hey, when I wanted to be a martial arts instructor, I had a lot of people that said to me, when are you going to get a real job? Right? And you hear professional wrestlers, when are you going to get a real job? Because they see a vision in the end. They see where they want to go. They have a dream, right?
Hmm.
But nobody else can really see your dream the way you say it, the way you see it. And if
Right.
we allowed everybody to tell us what we should do or could do, man, we might stifle a lot of success that we could have. I see it a lot of people afraid to try new things because maybe I won't be good at it,
Hmm.
or maybe it just won't work out. But what if it does?
Right.
What if it does? Right? I mean, look at the other side of the coin. And you talked about martial arts and professional wrestling being very different and very similar. I mean, here we are, a martial artist and a professional wrestler talking about the differences. But a lot of the things, a lot of the lessons that we learn in the ring are the same as what we teach on the mat. The lessons
Yeah.
of discipline, the lessons of hard work, the respect. I mean, I couldn't tell you how much that respect carried with me from the martial arts to professional wrestling. I remember, as a matter of fact, you brought up Brawlin' Bo Cooper. He was one of the people that at the very beginning, we ended up getting to know each other really well. But in the very beginning, I don't think that he was very fond of me because I came in as a confident, fighter, martial artist, and here I'm stepping into a whole new world, the locker room of professional wrestlers. Who's this karate guy? Who does he think? He doesn't belong here yet, right? And you
Hmm.
got to kind of, you know, pay your dues, right? And you got
Right.
to do what you need to do to get to that next level. And the other thing you were talking about is just your relationship with Billy Corgan. I mean, that's a pretty amazing connection to have made. Starting out as a kid who watched SmackDown on the little TV, and now
Yeah.
you are working with, you know, one of the biggest rock stars of our generation, and
Yeah.
the Smashing Pumpkins. So talk about what it was like to meet him for the first time, and how you guys work together on a regular basis.
Well, it's interesting. Like I said, I met him for the first time when I was doing championship wrestling from Hollywood, and we're in that dumpy little building in Port Hueneme, and I said yes to doing it, and then all of a sudden, like, here come the phone calls, like, hey, we're gonna start. We're gonna have a show. We're gonna have a 70th anniversary show. We started doing the big pay-per-views, and eventually, we went on to start the TV show NWA Power, and you know, I got flown out to Atlanta, and we started developing all this, and I think also developing that relationship that I had with Billy, and I think that he just kind of really appreciated the work that I put in, the character that I could be, and also, like, I think he saw the help that you can give to people as well, and like you said, when it comes to you have to be able to teach people on the mat. The same could be done in professional wrestling, and there have been times. There was a time when I was, here. Or it doesn't really matter anywhere, but like when I was when I first moved to San Antonio, I got connected with Jazz and Rodney Mack, who run a school called Dog Pound. It's on the other side of town, and we're nearer where I used to live. And I used to go there all the time, and they never paid me to go and coach or anything like that. But I went and I tried to develop these students in their character and their microphone skills. And I think that that's so important. I mean, arguably, and we can argue about this. That's having the character and being able to be somebody that people want to watch is probably the most important skill when it comes to pro wrestling. And when you go a lot of pro wrestling schools, there's so much emphasis, and there needs to be, because nobody knows how to put a match together yet, or take a bump, or do all that sort of stuff. But you can get by in the sport of professional wrestling, and you can make a career in the sport of professional wrestling without ever having to bump. If you are that character, if you can talk, if you can be interesting and people want to see you, or they want to hear you, or they want to hate you, it's one of those things of being able to manipulate emotions and find that inner you, or find that character that you can be, which is usually grounded in some part of reality, and then let that out. And so me doing that, and also, doing all these things with Billy, I mean, I'm so fortunate that I worked for Billy for so long, that now that I'm there with him, full time, helping run the National Wrestling Alliance, and it's kind of allowed me to step away from broadcast journalism, which was a struggle. I worked throughout the whole pandemic. And that was a tough time to be a journalist, and for everybody. And that's why there was a mass exodus after the pandemic, or at this point now, there's so many people that wanted to change careers because of the struggles that people went through with that. So I was very fortunate that I kind of stuck around, and we kept doing things, and it just kind of evolved into this thing. And it's one of those things where it's like, you just keep showing your dedication, you keep saying yes, you keep doing the best job that you can, and eventually you'll be able to get rewards from that. And I'd like to think that if for some reason Billy wakes up tomorrow and decides, I'm done with this wrestling thing, I just want to go back to doing music, I'm giving it up, it's done, I'd still be able to, I feel secure in myself to where I'd be able to continue on and survive with the
Mm-hmm.
skills and the experience that he's allowed me to get with the NWA. But what's great is I don't see that happening anytime soon. I see us growing at this exponential rate, especially going into next year. We've got a lot of great things kind of coming down the line here that I'm so grateful that I could be a part of, and that I could kind of use this to support myself and build a family and live a relatively comfortable life, while at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, it's one of those things too. It's like, people don't really understand, I think, I don't know if martial arts is like this or not, but I always have to kind of equate things to how my life was with broadcast news. And that's literally a 24/7 job. You're never off. The phone's always ringing. You're always trying to reach sources.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're off, like, you're constantly working and you're building to that next story. So with that, my work ethic got stretched to where it is today, where, like, and maybe it's not healthy, to be honest, for a lot of people, but also, like, that's kind of where you see success with people, is the people that really don't take a day off.
Right.
And maybe wrestling also helped me with that, now that I think about it, because I was doing, you know, 50 hours a week doing news, and then I was also spending that time doing pro wrestling. So if you start thinking about it, well, I've been working a 60-hour a week multi-career job, for the past 10 years. So
Yeah.
it kind of lends yourself to being able to be more experienced and stuff like that. And it puts you in a better place to where you can kind of get the things that you want in life and be successful. And so I think that that's kind of important too. I think that's what a lot of people need to kind of realize is, you know, if you put in the weekends and you put in the evenings, even if it's just something that you're passionate about and it's not making any money, and maybe you can't see the end goal where it does, eventually it might reach there. And even if
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, even if I was at a point right now where I was still working in news, I think I could still look back at all the things that I did and be really fond of all these experiences and all this great stuff that happened, because I was passionate about something, and because I was willing to sacrifice the time and to go and try and elevate myself. And I think that that's so important.
Well, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that it's not just pro wrestling and it's not just martial arts. You said it. When it comes to passion, if you're passionate about what you're doing, again, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I have never in my career as a martial artist said I don't want to go to work today. As a matter of fact,
Yeah,
I never call it. I'm not going to work. I'm going to the studio. I'm going to train. I'm going to teach.
right.
I get to, not I have to. That's a very different thing. And I can tell you, Daniel Groff is watching right now, who's very passionate about what he does. He's never off. His phone's
Yeah,
always ringing, always working. late nights, right? I mean, I've had late nights here at the school. I know I do it. I was talking about Danny Devine, when it comes to his, wrestling school. He's always on. He's living. That's just how you live. You're living the life of what you love to do,
Yeah.
and it never turns off. It's like being a parent. You
Hmm.
don't get to turn off being a parent. You're always a parent, and no matter how old they are. My kids are 17 and 20 now, but it doesn't matter when they were 3 and 5 or what. You don't turn off being a parent. You don't turn
Right.
off being a martial artist. You don't turn off being a pro wrestler. So I totally get that. And yeah, some people may say that the overly obsessive nature of our personality, that's just that way, right, may feed into it, and maybe it's not healthy. But I think that there's a lot that goes with it, and the lessons that you talked about, the things that come out of it, because maybe you don't have that total vision yet, but you get closer and closer to that vision every single day.
Yeah, and it's not just that too. I think every person's different, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that find their right work-life balance that's there. And I know maybe it's just I don't know if it's something that's biological in me or I've been trained to it at a certain point, but like I will find myself, trying to just relax and watch some television show that has nothing to do with anything and just some, something that's on there,
Hmm.
and I'll start getting anxious because I'm not doing something, you know?
Yep, I know
And so
that
there's
feeling
there's just
well.
that part of me where it's like, I feel like I'm wasting time right now. And so then I go and I do something, and it doesn't need to be, hitting a heavy bag or, making TikToks or anything that requires technology or physical work. It could be something as simple as writing a song or writing
Mhm.
uh, something, just trying to find something that's going to kind of keep you activated. I think mentally, I think that that's so important. And I feel like right now, like I see so many people that when they're not finding the success that they want in life, there's also this kind of connection to stuff, whether it's they're spending, you know, 16 hours a week playing video games, or they're really heavy into cannabis use, or they're drinking a lot. There seems to be something there that's kind of filling that void with the happiness. And I think it's when you're able to kind of step away from that and find, this is a problem and I can eliminate that from my life and maybe find something positive to put into it,
Mhm.
even without admitting that it is a problem. Like I don't own like a video game system in my house, and I could go to Best Buy right now and get a brand new PlayStation, Xbox, and play Call of Duty and all that stuff. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. God bless you. Have fun doing it if that's what you love to do. But I know for me, based on what I lived through junior high and high school, if I start going down that road, I'm just going to be sucked into that dopamine cycle of playing this game. And I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm not going to be healthy. Things
Mhm.
aren't going to get done. And there's not going to be progress in my life with it. So I don't have that, quality. And there's plenty of people out there, especially in today's digital age, which, I would have loved, and here's an interesting thought I haven't had until this moment. I would have loved if I was a teenager in high school to be able to play Nintendo 64 and then stream it live on like a platform like Twitch and talk and play at the same time. I think that perhaps if that existed when I was that age, I actually could have been successful at something like that
Mhm.
and gotten some group of followers, because you see it so much out there now. You get all
Absolutely.
these people out there that are not only, supporting themselves, but some people are making millions of dollars doing stuff like that.
That's right.
So I don't think I could do it now, but then I feel like I could have been able to, capture something in that moment. But I know at this point right now in my life, if I were to bring that into the house, it's like, well, I probably would have just said, you know what, hey, this guy wants to do a podcast with me, but that's going to interfere with me playing Call of Duty. So I'm going to go do that instead, but look at how rewarding this conversation is.
For
And I'm
sure.
meeting people and we're talking to people and perhaps we are changing someone's life. And that wouldn't have changed. That wouldn't be that way if I had some other device that I was attached to like that.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things like God bless people for being able to do that and have functioning lives. But at that same point, if it's something that you're doing a lot and you're not happy where you are, then find that issue, whatever it is, and try to reduce it, remove it, find some way around it, and then and perhaps you'll be able to fill that void with something that's more beneficial for you or your family,
Hmm.
whether it's financial, spiritual, or just health wise, like going to the gym. That's the other thing. I tell you that right there. I just thought of that. If I had that in the house, my trips to the Gold's Gym would go way down. And I'm not in wrestling shape, but I'm certainly in pretty decent shape, and I would completely just wither away.
Hmm.
So being able to recognize that's important too. I think that
I
that's the
agree.
thing with people is just being able to recognize where your weaknesses are, and work to either work around it, work to make it better, or work to not show it. You probably see it a lot in martial arts. Like I was when for the brief time that I was doing it, I was a pretty proficient striker. But when I went to the jujitsu, like everybody's tapping me out. Like I was
Hmm.
just not good at that, and I thought I would be with the wrestling background that I had, but it just didn't translate.
Hmm.
So I was much more successful on the Muay Thai classes than I ever was in the Jiu-Jitsu classes, but it also motivated me more to work harder on the thing that I was weaker
Well, and that's the thing right there. That's the big takeaway is, you recognize where your weakness was, and rather than fear of the failure, it motivated you to work harder at it.
at. Right.
And that's just kind of, I think that's not just a personality trait. I think that's something learned and developed over time, especially when you surround yourself with the right people, right? And it's so funny that you were talking about Call of Duty and playing video games. My hometown here, Moorpark, California, we have, I think, one of the top Call of Duty players in the country, if not the world,
Yeah.
Dylan Price. I think Attach. Anyway, he's right here in our hometown. I actually hope been working on getting him on the show as well. So interesting
It's so
how
interesting.
that comes up.
You could get a guy like that, and his story is going to be so completely different, where he was able to take something that really
That's right.
was his strength in video games and stuff. And see, that's all the thing right now is I'm at a point in my life where I'm engaged. We're going to get married as we record this, a year to today will be my wedding.
Right.
And then you start a family and you have kids, and so in my mind it's like, so what am I going to do to help raise these children to be responsible citizens? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
When do you let a kid have a cell phone now? When do you let them, have that screen time? It's one of those things where it's constantly evolving. And it's like one of those things where you could have that old school mindset of they're not going to have it until high school and all that other stuff. It's like, well, then they're going to be super behind everybody who already has that. And potentially it slows them down from having those careers, because I couldn't imagine having any career now without being technologically literate. So you
It's
have to be able to
crazy, right?
have that sort of thing. So trying to find that balance it's intimidating to me. I'm sure either you'll figure it out or you won't. You're raising, and I'm sure there's plenty of
There's
parents
no
out there
playbook.
feeling this stuff. There's no playbook.
There's no
There's a
playbook
lot of
for being
people.
a parent.
There's a lot of people who write playbooks, and they do quite well on Amazon. But I don't know. Every person's different. I know
That's right.
I'm much different than my brother. And so in when you see that and just the way that things are going in this world. But I think what it really comes down to, and it's what I think you have this podcast for, is the motivation and the motivation to better yourself and to better your family and to better the circumstances and maybe perhaps even better your whole community.
Hmm.
And I think the best way you can do that is just by kind of staying focused and it's staying humble too. I think it's a big thing. I've always really downplayed everything that like is going on with my life, and I've never really been like big flashy with that sort of stuff. And perhaps that also comes from the pro wrestling training. Shake hands, keep your head down, be respectful and all that sort of stuff. Or maybe that's the upbringing that I came from, that Italian Catholic background or something that was beat into me. But I think that that's one of those things too. If you could be humble and just kind of work hard and be polite, I mean, you can kind of get pretty far in life, and that's what if anybody takes anything away from that, it's just, who says it best every single day is a person that, I'd like to call as a friend, but I don't know. We didn't hang out so much, but I remember back in the days at Championship Wrestling Hollywood with Atum Pierce. It's and now I'm going to butcher the tweet that he does every day, but it's like treat people fairly, earn respect, and be something like that. There's three things, and now I've completely lost it. But even with those two, it's just if you treat people fairly and you just earn respect from people and you're humble, you'll get through life pretty well.
Right. Right. Well, immediately when you started talking about humble and you started talking about a quote, you brought up Adam Pierce. I was thinking of, The Rock, right?
Hmm.
Be humble, be hungry, be the hardest worker in the room, right?
There you go.
I every day, if we could live that, I think we can all reach the levels of success that we want. Well, listen,
Yep.
this 55 minutes has gone very quickly, and just amazing conversation today. I want to thank everybody that has been watching live, and this is your last chance to throw in a comment or a question before we end
Or
here
an
live.
insult. Don't be afraid to insult me. I love
Yeah,
those.
right. It doesn't matter. See, in
Mama
pro wrestling,
jokes.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you love me or hate me. You're
Yeah,
gonna
just
you're
as
gonna
long
tune
just as long
in.
as you paid a ticket. That's all.
That's right.
You
Right.
paid for your seat. That's what I wanted.
So, listen, thank you so much for being on. Again, I want to just give a thank you to Ryan Katz for introducing us and giving us this opportunity to chat. If you hang out for about 60 seconds after this, just want to do a little recap with you, but reminding everybody to check in next Monday and every Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have some great guests coming up. Next week, we have Mr. Dan Farron, who was a booker for
Good old
MPW,
Dan.
and
Oh,
Dan
I know
Farron,
Dan
he's going to be
well.
on here. So he's going to tell some good stories and a whole lot more, guys. Make sure to go follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Master Motivation Podcast, and just give us some comments. Let us know if you like what you hear. So, Joe, thanks for being on the show today.
My pleasure.
All right, guys, we're going to go out with the video, and Joe, I'll be back in 60 seconds.
Cool.